We are the hub for news, results, and CEO interviews focusing the junior commodities sector. We provide market analysis and perspective that will help position you for solid returns.
Happy Friday, everyone. It's been a while since we've said hello, but we're off to an interesting start to 2023 here at the Market Mindset, where we look at the sectors and the stories and the companies that are looking not only change the way that we interact in space and time and use energy, but the real or opportunities out there for people to look at companies that are in this growth sector. And although we think it's a challenging year economically, financially, there are lots of good things on the horizon. Not only, some hints at the economy possibly getting a bit better, but certainly there's lots of stories out there. And we're going to go through some sectors today that we like, that'll highlight where there's big growth. And I always caution, if you could just take out the politics part of this, I assure you there's lots of money being funneled to these sectors, which means there's an opportunity for you to make some money as well.
Well, something we consistently talk about is following the narrative and the shift in where things are going with that direction, and how can you capitalize and take advantage of what is clearly a push towards these different sectors and these different ideas, and that's a big focus on what we do. And one thing we wanted to jump into today was kind of centered around this really great Forbes article that I'd encourage people to go and read, called "The 5 Technologies That Will Change the Future of the Human Race," and it breaks down 5 really interesting, frightening, but hugely scalable technologies and kind of innovations that are without a doubt going to set the stage for the next decade and beyond.
Yes, and I mean it's good to see these types of things. And although tech may not see a big rebound in 2023, I'm not going to make any predictions. Make no mistake, the amount of work being done behind the scenes that's maybe not getting as much attention as it should, is being done. There's a lot of work being done. And the way I kind of look at things is you could spend all day looking at all the negative things, which there's, as we always say, there's lots of it. Or you could focus your attention, pivot, and go look at all these, a lot of private companies, but a lot of public companies. They're absolutely doing incredible things out there. And before we jump into that article, one of the sectors I wanted to throw in, kind of tie it all together, was I just got back from Kansas City from FarmCon, and this will kind of bring us into the ag tech kind of sector. And it was by the Van Trump family down there in Kansas City, an incredible event. Almost 1,000 people there. It was amazing, absolutely friendly, and so educational. And I think what I really gleaned on it was not only the openness to a lot of ideas. It was the use of carbon capture into soil, the use of like biodiesel, and also this kind of bridges us into like the topic or the title for this video, which was about Alphabet. And that kind of lead us into this Forbes article too, because it's a little combination of all these sectors that Forbes talking about. But why don't you, before we talk about Mineral, which is this new Alphabet, well, it's not new. I mean, they've been working hard, but they're getting a lot of attention now because it's in ag tech. Maybe let's look at this video first, and then we'll get into each sector of how Forbes views things.
Yeah. If we can get that video up, that's perfect. And because it kind of sets the stage nicely for where we'll go with this conversation. But I'm glad you mentioned FarmCon as well, because you came back kind of saying, like, look, there's some really cool stuff going on in this industry. Here's the Mineral video here. We'll take a look at.
Yeah. So what this is it's a rover that's rolling over fields to collect all sorts of data, not only in regards to the plants itself, but the soil. And make no mistake, they're getting to a point where they're going to track from like literally bean to ground, to like seed to ground, to product. Yeah. And partly people think, oh, that's a little bit frightening that they're going to track exactly where you're getting things. And they can do this in mining as well. What's interesting about that is you can see the level of precision that they can get down to see ripeness, how things are growing, how much is growing, so they can start to predict yield crop. They do use machine learning, so the amount of data they're collecting, it's absolutely fascinating. And this is going to happen on a large scale. So this is all part of this X company or Mineral. And it's I think it's part of the Moonshot project. I think it's called, and I could be getting it wrong, but they're looking to just kind of revolutionize, a lot of our food and how we look at the data, how we can really optimize not only fertilizers, but how we can maybe even, and this is one of the things in the event too, was how to get more protein into different things. And we're not talking GMO, we're talking non-GMO, optimizing productivity and doing it. Also, these rovers are electric. So in financial, ecologically friendly ways. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and it kind of ties together with these other technological advancements, because when you take the data that something like that can collect, then you can use, like one of the, I'll tie it right into the article here. One of the 5 technologies that are listed is gene technology. Well, if you've got data and analytics on all these different crops and their yields and different potentials, well, then you can talk about engineering. I'm not talking about the food itself, but engineering the fertilizers in new and improved ways to increase those yields, to capitalize on, what's going to be the best kind of environment for certain crops, and therefore, revolutionize the kind of large scale farming industry.
And I mean, if you're concerned about carbon being an issue, and we talked about this before, the agritech and food industry is a major part of that, emissions, but it's also a major part of the solution, because you can capture a lot of carbon and put it right back into the soil. One of the things that we saw down in FarmCon 2 was you'll hear a lot of issues about nitrogen now. And if you ask a farmer, nitrogen's kind of like, steroids for crop. And there's definitely controversy with nitrogen. You can see in Denmark, I believe it is, where the government's like basically taking farms from farmers. They're
in the Netherlands, yeah.
The Netherlands, sorry, yes.
Yeah.
Where they're, the EU saying you can't use nitrogen anymore. This was something they promoted back in 2008, by the way. And now they're saying you can't. So there's lots of bad things happening in regard to nitrogen, but and I'm trying not to take a bias, because it can have problems downstream with for water and rivers and the nitrogen itself. I'm not an expert in this, but I do know that that's a big problem. One of the companies that was there believes they solved that issue. So you can actually extract nitrogen, use it on your own farm, and it's going to have no downstream issues. It'll be, ecologically friendly, environmentally friendly. So when people look at all these problems, is that you don't have to go to, they'll shut it down. You can go, listen, there's lots of companies that are doing some great work that are giving, options and solving these problems. And the one thing I wanted to highlight too with this mineral is that we've heard for 50 years, there's not enough food on the planet. There's not enough this to sustain life. There's this, you go, no, there's the human ingenuity has always come in. It's the same thing with the climate, fear mongering of it's the end of the world, it's this and this. And there's always advancements happening that are making things cleaner, better, more efficient, and more optimized. And that's happening right now. It is going on. So I think it's important to mention, because you can focus on these solutions and what the positive things, or you can get caught up in a lot of the noise, which is mostly nonsense, and get excited about some of these companies.
Yeah, there's no shortage of companies that are doing all sorts of incredible things and tackling these problems. And like you kind of said, with human ingenuity, there's this, ability that for us to solve large scale problems. And as technology continues to advance and change in the years ahead as well, the capability and capacity that we're going to have as a species to grow and change with the kind of the growth in technology is going to be huge. There's going to be no shortage of opportunities of how things can be improved upon and changed. And that's what's really exciting about kind of looking at these tech innovations. And I kind of led off by saying, it's a little bit scary too, because there is some scary stuff to it, which we don't shy away from that. But the upside and the potential of, if this is used properly and implemented in intelligent and useful ways, it's incredible to think of the kind of strides that we could make over the next, number of years.
Yeah, and I focus also on the food and the fertilizer part, because that isn't a problem that we've just got solved. Like people think, oh, we've got the food thing down. We don't. And also, which is why we saw fertilizers go up and down, and we see a lot more interest in fertilizer right now. But also the Russia situation that caused we're moving into this multi-global kind of world, this one world globalism thing. which is a terrible idea. We'll leave that alone. But universalistic ideas they're not good. We're seeing more, partnerships emerging, and that means that there's a lot more challenges moving ahead. And Alphabet, which is this mineral company, you all know from Fang. I mean, they own Fang, so all those kind of companies. But you can see that they're also doing these great things, and it ties into that whole carbon discussion. Food as feeding not only your own countries but other countries as well, in efficient and effective ways. These kind of things we are really interested in following on. So maybe touch on the Forbes article, what they are looking at as well, because we have a lot of interlocking there.
Yeah, I'll list off kind of the big five. I mentioned gene technology because I think that can be applicable, especially in the fertilizer and agri-tech industry. AI is obviously the big one. I think it's the one that's on a lot of people's minds right now. It's obviously, if you've been paying attention to any of the kind of discourse on social media surrounding AI, there's been a lot of cool different chat AIs and things that people have been using over the past month or so that have kind of taken off in popularity. Human computer interfaces is another technology they listed. Extended reality, so that's kind of similar to AR, but kind of taking it another step further. And 3D printing is one that they labeled on there as well, which I think most people are fairly familiar with 3D printing, so we won't spend too much time on that one. But I think there's incredible, applications for all of these. But certainly when you look more specifically at us and what we're interested in, first company that comes to mind for me, and I'm sure it did for you as well, Andrew, is Versus. Versus ties into this very well. Yes.
We're going to hopefully have an update with Versus, but this company is certainly the one that we're looking at that can that's going to be a leader in this space. And it is truly AI they're working on. And that AI discussion comes into two different things: deep learning and machine learning. We have a report on that you can get on our website for free. And now every place is, there is claiming to be AI because it's the buzzword, and a lot isn't. A lot isn't even machine learning. But this is, it is that dystopian. It can go very poorly, but it also can be done very well. And you have to take out the political side. And believe me, I'm a freedom advocate. I don't necessarily like the capabilities that AI can have to some degree, but it is here, and it can be exceptionally helpful. And it is moving along at a pretty good rate. People think that we're, so far ahead where it's semantic and thinking robots that are able to think on their own. It's still, a lot of it's just mimicking machine learning and whatnot, but it is able to crunch a ton of data. Like if you see this, the Chatter one, what is it called? Chat GPT?
GPT or
GPT.
Yeah.
Which that alone is a $20 billion company right now. They're saying Microsoft's going to spend another $10 billion just on AI itself in this capacity. You can see the scale and scope of those projects are massive. And Versus, if you just kind of remind people, they're working with the governing body that puts the rules in place for the World Wide Web to create this new level of internet, which will be the spatial web, and using artificial intelligence in order to interact not only with space and objects to gather information and to make predictive qualities. It can go into pretty much every sector. And we like to then scale it back a bit to go, this is a big change that can happen. But at the same time, it's right now solving problems just in the workflow logistics side of things in warehouses. And that alone, as one small unit within its realm of possibilities, it could be exceptionally profitable. And they're working and building relationships with the biggest companies out there right now. So we'll have more on that soon, but that kind of covers that AI, where the practical applications of this are pretty interesting and pretty incredible.
Yeah. Well, and I'll go a step further than that too, and say, like, the exciting thing about Versus is that when you break down kind of these five different innovations that are gonna be game changing, I'd argue that Versus ties into three of them. Yeah, I think they tie into extended reality as well, and they certainly tie into, as you mentioned, with their Wayfinder app, which they're testing in. I believe it's over 200 different warehouses. is human computer interfacing as well, which doesn't necessarily mean wearable technology and stuff like that, but anything that's kind of how we interact with machines, with data, with any sort of interfacing. So it ties into three of them. That's the incredible opportunity with Versus is there are so many different applications that they have that it's becomes very exciting when you look at it.
Yes, and the one thing that makes it stand out, rather it's got interesting technology and whatnot, and they are leading in the space, is the relationships they have with these governing bodies that are creating the rules around this. Like if you're part of that conversation, that's critical. I mean, that's key, because that's who decides basically what the next platform is going to be, what it's going to be like. If you're in that conversation, that's a good place to be. If you're out and you're a whiz kid who's kind of created something, that's also exciting and brilliant and whatnot. But you want to be with these bigger authorities that are saying, this is the framework, we've decided the framework, and they're having direct input sharing. That's pretty huge. But we can see that, that because that AI component is part of that mineral. It's also part of another company, Climeworks, and they're in the media quite a bit because they're able to sequester carbon from the sky. And so we want to talk about this because they could pull multi-megaton carbon removal capacity, and they're saying by 2040. So it's well off, but it's underway. So it's good for people to remind them that these things are going on. The end of the world is not happening. It's not coming. All the panic and all the fear mongering, you can kind of breathe easy. There are so many projects that are going underway, making huge step forward, that we don't even have to wait on those ones. Like right today, we're doing things that are positively affecting, if you believe carbon is the issue, and that's going to solve all the problems. All these other oil and gas companies are able to sequester carbon in different ways as well, storing it underground. And of course, that brings it to some of the companies we work with that are able to take carbon and sequester it into concrete. So it's exciting times. Does it mean it's going to translate into the market this year? It might for picks. That's why we still believe this is a stock picking market. I don't know if we're going to see a ton of exchange traded fund love, a ton of overall market growth. I know whether it's JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs, they believe that 60-40 portfolio for the next 5 to 10 years will still do well, but it's dropped quite a bit. They're expecting it more to, I think it's like 6.2% yield over the long term, which is still great. I mean, if you can get that, depending where inflation is, then that's still not too bad. So what's the other ones here?
So the other two that are very interesting, gene technology is a fascinating one because it's the manipulation of DNA and genomes in living organisms. Now, me personally, I don't want to touch that when it goes as far as human genomes. But where I think it can be extremely interesting, and tying it back to FarmCon, is improving fertilizers and different methods that we use around fertilization. How different areas are going to require different types of soil and fertilizer. They're already able to do stuff like that, but if you can improve on that and continue to grow in that field, and also on the side of healthcare, when there is like serious illnesses like cancer and heart disease, if there's certain ways that you can target and deal with those concerns, that's where it comes down to. And now, I'm not someone who knows enough about gene technology or human biology or anything like that to have any sort of expertise on it, but you can see the potential of where it can go when it could be applied properly, but also you can see the potential of where this could be a bigger issue that we have to deal with down the road.
Yes, and bringing that up too, it's so interesting too, because the whole idea of regenerative farming, part of what's happened to the soil, it's been totally degraded. It's been punched out. I mean, punched out is not a technical term, but it's been beaten up pretty bad because of industrial farming to some extent, and they're working on that too. And certainly farmers are open to that. They're talking about different microbes they can put into the soil to help regenerate. There's a lot of techniques, and that's why we think ag tech is so critical, because it also bleeds into some of these other ones. It bleeds into carbon, it bleeds into the AI. And of course, I think one that, and the AI we've talked about is, of course, the energy and renewable market, which is also, you're talking about carbon as well. We've seen since 2019 about $300 billion of investment into gigafactories, either in truth or in pledges. It's really, they're calling it the dawn of a new industrial age. I think another term, which is more of the WEF term, is the fourth industrial revolution, which we've heard years and years over time. They're expecting that clean energy technology sector is going to triple in value by 2030. That's the International Energy Agency. And I just want to give a couple highlights here. If you look at, say, even just Saudi Arabia, which everyone knows is oil and gas. And I'm going to liken this by saying, well, they've got a public investment fund and it's with state minor. I think it's Ma'aden, and they announced $3.2 billion fund, $3.2 billion for strategic metal opportunities. And this is their way to diversify away from strictly oil and gas to give reliable metals into this growing sector. So someone goes, oh, well, they were able to do that because they had oil and gas for so long. Canada has as well. Why don't we have a $3.2 billion fund? We could have. We could actually be developing that right now if we were to rely on oil and gas again to help us get through this thing. Because once again, make no mistake, we're not using oil and gas. We're still going to be. It'll just be used in different ways. But that $3.2 billion that they're pledging, we see also that China, they dominate the trade in clean energy by far. So even if you don't like the narrative, even if you say, I don't believe in it, they're far ahead. And we're not only being told that that's the direction that we're going. If every Western country is pledging money and saying we're going this direction, and the leader is another country that we should have trade with, but is also questionable, we've got some concerns. Also, we have 70% of the world's cobalt comes from 3 countries, but like 50% of it, most of it comes from DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. So to me, there's a couple of solutions there. And if you don't know the problems in DRC, it's easy to look up or give me a call. There are lots of cobalt deposits or exploration projects that one could invest in to go find. But also, we can also divert a lot of that into the lithium ion type of battery, which is why we're interested also in that ag tech, like phosphate. We've talked a lot about high grade phosphate. That ties into this whole story as well. And once again, with the AI component, and we were kind of hinting about it with mineral, is that they're going to trace where all of these commodities come from. And that chain of custody is going to matter more and more. That whole ESG discussion as to if it's coming from DRC, if it's coming from a country like Indonesia that just dumps tailings into the ocean, they're going to be less likely to be, that's a hard sell to allow companies that are talking green to get away with if you are being sincere and you're being honest about where you want to do business.
Yeah. Well, I know you mentioned with phosphate there, an interesting kind of way to tie that in is right now the demand for lithium, and I'm not 100% on this number. I know it's between 60 and 70% of the demand for lithium is based off electric batteries. Yes. I wouldn't be surprised to see the demand for phosphate shift in that direction as well, which then, there's pros and cons to that. Yes, we think we can see the potential for those lithium are the LFP batteries. But also the flip of that is, well, you don't want to be taking too much phosphate away from the agritech industry as well, because there's critical needs there that are going to need to be met as well. So securing that phosphate supply, and that's something where Canada has a great opportunity. There's a number of companies, especially in Quebec and Ontario, that have huge potential to help meet the critical need for it. But I see that the demand for that skyrocketing as well as lithium's done over the last few years. I'd expect to see phosphate continue down that same sort of trend.
It certainly has an opportunity. And I mean, lithium, of course, moving forward, I think Elon Musk said if you have a lithium production facility, it's a license to print money, which is true. And so we're going to see, of course, lithium as being part of the story, but the phosphate, especially high grade phosphate, finding projects that have that high grade, which can be used either in farming and fertilizer, or it can be used towards the battery story. That gives you a lot of flexibility. The last thing we'll kind of mention are the gases. So of course you've got the green hydrogen, a lot more talk about hydrogen, a lot more talk about helium and noble gases like neon and whatnot. Those will, of course, have huge impact in the future moving forward, and as well uranium. I mean, unless if people are really, and we say it a lot, if people are being serious about wanting to have clean, renewable energy, and affecting, carbon in the sky, then you're talking uranium. And we're seeing projects being pushed forward. Rolls-Royce has really great videos on YouTube about their small modular reactors. And we're seeing lots of places interested in buying them, getting them. And I think in the West, because believe me, they're buying them like crazy in China and installing them. Japan is starting to reignite a couple of projects, and Europe as well. So, is it the dawn of a new energy age? Yes. And who is going to come out the end winner? I don't know the end winner, but I think every piece will have a place in it. And that being said, we're going to have a very cool series out with someone who knows. John Hikeway, who's from Stormcrow Capital. He's been gracious enough to give us a lot of time to walk us through his take on how we could take this, the solutions step by step by step. And I think it's an 8-episode series we're going to have out. And, I wanted to put that out now because we'll have it out soon. And it highlights a lot of these kind of renewable energy stories, the key need for mining. And, like Canada, we've said it before, if we had the right people in place to take advantage, to not only encourage our oil and gas to transition to like Saudi Arabia, put money into vanadium redox batteries, to put money into other technologies to diversify, Canada could be so far ahead right now. It would be absolutely incredible. So hopefully, if people get a little bit more educated, a bit more excited about it, they'll put people in place that have the technical ability, the foresight to look at these, to go, we see that there's an issue and we've got solutions, rather than just problem. It's like, well, what's the solutions? Like, so there's lots of good news out there, and I'll now shut up because I'm getting a little bit pumped. But listen, I'd rather be a little bit pumped than looking at all the terrible news that's out there that we're facing, and focus our energy in all these cool companies doing all these great things.
Well, that's, kind of the wrap up point I was going to make is it's easy to get pumped and excited about this because we started this conversation talking about 5 big technology innovations that are going to really define 2023. Every single one of those technologies has applications that tie back to minerals and mining in one way or another. And I know we've been beating this drum, you especially, for the past few years. But if there's anything like that people can take away from this conversation, is that's where your solutions lie. They're literally in the ground. Let's go get them out of there. But that's where the opportunity is so huge. And for a country like Canada to step in and, I'll quickly tie it back to Saudi Arabia and the point you were making there about that massive investment. That's a huge step for a country like Saudi Arabia to make, not necessarily just to diversify their economy away from oil and gas, but because, for anyone who watched the World Cup in Qatar, those Middle Eastern nations don't need to go away. That oil and gas money's good. They're good. They're going to be doing all right for a while. But to already be making those steps, they're recognizing the critical need for this. They're recognizing that this is the direction that things are going to go, that you can't do any of this. You mentioned helium and hydrogen and other noble gases. There's no way to do any of this massive, large-scale computing without those.
Yes.
So every single facet of this has to be tied back to then, okay, what are the actual ground minerals, base metals, whatever, that support this innovation and this growth? And that's what's super exciting. And that's why it's easy to see kind of the way that the mining, commodities, resource sector can support this continued innovation and growth. And once you can kind of put those two things together, the possibilities become really endless.
Yeah, and that just reminds me of kind of to highlight that oil and gas part of always being a part of the solution. This is going to be a bit of an eye opener for a lot of people. China just signed a 30-year, not 5, 30-year deal for oil and gas with ISIS.
Oh, good.
So go Google that. So that'll put some perspective as to where we are on this discussion and what the timeframes are. And that's not to just gaslight people. That's just to put some context and some reality into the conversation. That there's a lot of politics being played here, as well as some good solutions. But you have to do a little bit of digging out there, and that's what we always encourage. Do a little bit of digging, a little bit of critical thinking, and put things in context, and then we can see that there's lots of solutions. So please, Austin, end it, roll it up, and tell us what you think.
Roll it up. You know what? I'm just gonna leave with this. We're gonna have so much content rolling out this year. You mentioned that great series. I've been lucky to see a few of those episodes already with John Highquay. That's going to be incredibly insightful for people. I'm excited for that to get out there. You mentioned that China deal in Afghanistan there and all that. If you're not following us on Twitter, head over to the Market Mindset on Twitter. I'm going to post a video on there later today from about a year and a half ago, basically saying this is what's going to happen. China's going to go into Afghanistan and make this deal. So because that's not surprising at the end of the day. But make sure you guys are locked in. If you're not signed up on the website, head over there, sign up right now. We're going to have tons of great content coming up. We're going to have our newsletter, quarterly newsletter coming out at the end of the month here. We've got news flow blurbs that are coming out every day. If you were on our website, you heard about the Saudi Arabia investment a few days ago. We're going to keep stuff like that rolling out all year. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We've had awesome growth over the last couple of years. Like the video. It helps us. If you like the video, like the video. It helps us out. It does us a huge favor. We went a little long today, Andrew, but it's a great conversation, and it's just shows the scope of everything that we're kind of looking at. So I think 2023 is going to have a lot of exciting opportunities. Stay locked in with us, and we're going to share as much of that information with you as we can.
Take care, everyone.
Cheers, guys.